There's only one place on the planet that has a virtually unlimited supply of project cars for sale. Some just need a little work, others they need significantly more. It's where insurance companies send wrecked, flooded, and even stolen cars to be auctioned off, aka the salvage auction. Now normally buying these cars means sitting in front of the computer, placing bids, and having them shipped in. Today though, we're doing it the fun way. We've came to Copart in Northern Virginia where they have thousands upon thousands of cars. New or old, cheap or expensive, if it was totaled within 100 or so miles of here, it's in this lot. And my master plan for the day, we're gonna walk this entire property and see what we can find. This one's impossible to miss. The OG Viper. This one's a 1995. It's got the tri-spoke wheels. Those things were so sick, at least for the 90s. Of the older Vipers, everybody always goes crazy over the GTSs, and rightfully so. They're awesome cars. They look so tough. But something about these, I just think they're cool. We probably all know the story that Dodge had to build this car on a shoestring budget and, for lack of better terms, cut corners anywhere they could, use what they had laying around, and something about that is just really cool to me. It's got the soft top, I believe. Yeah, these are the ones that didn't even come with windows. There's a plastic insert that goes into that little slot on the door panel. Just like the window situation on the sides, it's kind of the same deal in the back. I don't believe it's there. So somewhere in Central Virginia, there's presumably a guy sitting with all the windows you need for this car just chilling in his garage. Now, I did recently buy one of these that was really, really bad off. And even on that one, we paid $8,000 for it. It still broke even / made a little bit of money. And we were left, of course, with a pretty damaged Viper engine to put into something else. This one's significantly better than that. In fact, this one I'd presume is going to be fixed. There's really not enough damage here to make any reasonable person want to take this one off the road. You see the front passenger frame rail, that has a small kink in it. The horn that goes on the front, that's bent around it. But the front end in general is in really nice shape. One crazy part about these cars, the headlights. They're like $2,000 or $3,000 a piece. So that doesn't exactly bode well for trying to find a passenger to repair this car, but hey, eventually one will come around. The hoods on these, they're also crazy expensive, but while this one is damaged, the whole hood is still here. So I am 100% positive that somebody would fix that over replacing it. Now let's take a quick look under the hood, which yes, does open from the back if you haven't messed with one of these before. The engine, it's all in the right place. It's just so much better than the one I bought. The two cars really aren't even in the same ballpark. With how long these engine bays are, I have no doubt that the engine in this one is untouched, solid, and ready to go. I think it's likely that you wouldn't have to do anything to it. The lower front end, the driver's side, all that looks relatively untouched, so I'm thinking that the impact was only over here on the passenger side and they just took the bumper off. It's not with the car, so you will have to source all the little pieces to go with it. That's not ideal, but again, not the biggest deal in the world. Let's see what the inside looks like. Gray interior. I haven't seen a lot of that. They're almost all black. So this is before these cars came with airbags. And the whole interior on this, every piece of it just screams 90s. I believe those climate controls and a few other parts are shared with like the Dodge minivan of the same year. I always love seeing these things at the auction. Now for me, they're kind of a nostalgia piece. I wouldn't necessarily buy an RT10 to rebuild, especially since I'm in the middle of my own Viper rebuild at the moment. And being that this one is through and through a rebuilder, I really don't see any way we bring that one home. I almost walked past it. You know, it's a dark color, it's kind of unassuming, the front end's smashed up. One could mistake this for a non-M3 series pretty easy. But no, it's an E46 M3, and we'll just cut right to the chase here. The important part is manual. Otherwise, the interior is actually a pretty disgusting color combo. It's gray, it's in pretty decent shape though, but all that matters, let's be honest, is the 3 pedals. Now personally, I'm not the biggest BMW guy. I have owned one M3 in my life. It was an E92, but as far as I'm concerned with M3s, the older they get, the cooler they get. A manual E46 M3 is definitely a car I'd like to own. Will it be this one? I don't know. The front core support, that's all bashed up, but it looks like that's a bolt-on part, no big deal there. The radiator assembly, the fan, that's all beat up. The front bumper, the headlights, they're missing completely. But on this car, what's really going to be important is this lower frame rail. And it is marked up by insurance, but to the naked eye, all I see is this end plate being a little bent. Now that's not the biggest deal, but we're not going to really know what's going on back under this broken up air box. So I suppose that frame rail could be bent, but if it is, it really doesn't look that bad or that hard to fix. It's not like it's kinked at a 45-degree angle or anything. One thing I'm always concerned about on cars that I don't know that well, like a BMW, is how did the drivetrain hold up? To some extent, bodywork's bodywork. It's all metal, it all kind of moves the same way. But the engine, this is where things get complicated, especially on a complex German car like this. So the fact that it looks like, even though this front end pushed back a little bit, it didn't contact the motor. There's insurance markings on the radiator hose and that one little connector there, no big deal. That's a major plus. Fixing the body damage on this thing, I'm fully confident. If we had to get into the motor, I'm less confident. Not at all confident, to be exact. Now, don't get me wrong, that can be a really fun way to learn a new platform, but there is a time and place for that, and it's something you really have to think about before getting into a rebuild on a new platform. Now, other than that front end damage, the chassis looks really nice. I mean, sure, the fender's bent in a little bit. You could probably fix that if we wanted to. It's got beautiful wheels on it. Even the tires are practically new. Let's see, as for the back, it is untouched. Completely untouched. It's in really nice shape, actually. Same deal with the passenger side. It's a really nice car, except for that little bit of front end damage. But if you were planning on buying one of these at auction or rebuild, this is, by all metrics, an awesome candidate. Fairly light front end damage. The engine's not touched. The rear of the car is not touched. If there was any M3 to buy to learn a new platform, I think we just found it. Now, the only downside to that is it's going to pull a ton of money when it runs at auction. As for how much, well, we'll just have to wait till it comes up for bid. Here we go. Yes, this is another car kind of like that M3. It's a dark color. It doesn't really stand out, especially because the front end's all beat up. But I mean, when the hood's popped, you got this big shiny Hellcat 2.4 liter supercharger sticking out the top. You know, you're not truly gonna miss it. This one, it got it good. Usually I'm pretty optimistic on these cars because they are fairly easy to rebuild, even when they have pretty heavy frame damage. This though, this one just, no, I don't think so. If I was buying this one, it's 100% as a parts car, unfortunately. The entire strut tower assembly, that's pushed back way farther than it should be. The control arms are broken, but that's the least of our concerns. All of that is supposed to be attached to the frame rail up here. The frame rail itself is just a little wavy now. This was not a good time. You kind of get a better picture of how this wreck took place when you have the hood down. It just got, I almost said it got smoked, but I think it smoked something that's probably closer to the truth here. The fender is barely hanging on. The backside of the car, that looks halfway decent. Let's see. Yeah, I don't know about that. Yeah, the back of the car is great. So if you have one of these that's wrecked in the back and you need a donor car, you need a couple quarter panels, this one might not be a bad bet. It's surely not going to pull top dollar by Hellcat standards. Ooh. I mean, it is a Hellcat after all, so I suppose that's what the tires should look like. Let's see what we got going on the inside. It is, oh, it's manual. We have a manual Hellcat. So as someone who's sought these out for quite some time because I've needed parts from them, they are not easy to find at all. That rod got me way too excited, but outside of that, the interior is in fairly decent shape, especially for a car that got smashed like this. Essentially every airbag is blown, the curtains, the driver, the passenger. The seats are intact though. It has a full carbon fiber center console and dash trim package. That's actually kind of cool. The car, and this isn't the case with most of them, does look really clean. So not only is this one a parts car, at least in my opinion, it's a parts car that I really want just because it's manual. So the question I have is, how did the engine hold up? It got hit almost entirely on the outside of the driver frame rail, meaning that the engine really shouldn't be that bad off. You see the power steering pump pulley down there? That's cocked, so you need to replace that. But when I'm looking for engine damage here, I'm more concerned about something getting smashed into the block, something like the engine mounts or the AC compressor being ripped off the block entirely. Not only is that not the case here, but unlike some of the ones I've bought in the past with major front end damage, the engine, the whole drivetrain, is not pushed back. These Hellcat engines don't handle being pushed back well at all. A lot of different stuff gets broken on them, and it makes it really difficult to put the motor to good use. On this one, you can see the throttle body's actually wedged open. There's a piece of the plastic air box in there. Let's see. Get that out. Now it's a little more protected from the elements. Even though that was open, I don't realistically see water getting in there because it does have the intake coupler on it, and that should, in theory, trap most of the water. On this, almost all the cooling's gone. The intercooler pump is still there, but the intercooler core is completely missing. There's just the plastic intake. There's not a lot left on the front end of this, but again, it's a manual drivetrain Hellcat that certainly isn't going to pull a ton of money. I'd say this thing goes for somewhere between 12 and 15 grand, and if that holds up, it'll probably be back at my shop. We didn't make it 50 feet. There's the Hellcat we just looked at, and there's our next Hellcat. This one I didn't see on the sale list before I got down here. It must have just showed up to the auction. And unlike the last one, I would venture to guess by what we can say right now that this one's going to be rebuilt. This is a newer one for sure. It is a basic Hellcat, not a red eye. Every time I see these hoods, I always think red eye, even though the newer Hellcats come with it as well. On the back of it, at first glance looks really good, but then you see this trunk gap. That is massive. The trunk gap on the driver's side, that is overlapping there. This gets way worse really fast. It got smoked on this rear corner. The door as well, they're all kinds of bashed in. It might not come across great in camera, but you could easily fit a basketball or two there. Now we can't get in the driver's side, so let's see what's going on the passenger side. Oh, peanut butter interior. That's beautiful, and it looks brand new. Oh, jailbreak. That's a shame. The peanut butter door panels as well. It's just a beautiful combo. I'm not a big silver fan, but silver on that, it's all right. I'll take it. Let's see how she held up under here. Oh my God, it does look new. This one, we can't get in to check the power. I don't know if this car would even have power with all the electrical damage we're gonna have, but it's gotta be super low mileage. It has to be. Of all the Hellcats I've seen at auction, I don't think I've ever seen one this clean. It still has the blue plastic on the last call badge. That's pretty cool. Now, I personally might be just a little scared off of fixing one like this. I mean, it got hit so hard that it popped the sunroof out of the roof. That is pretty wild. I'd bet that if you looked hard enough, you could probably find a kink or something on the passenger side as well. We do have this, but I don't think that's related. It might not show up very well, but it's kinked right about there. Okay, maybe I'm wrong on that one. Regardless though, this thing's severely bent in half. It's definitely not unfixable, but it's not gonna be easy by any means. Now I think because this one's so new, even with this damage that might not necessarily translate as being as bad as it is if you're not seeing it in person, I think this one's still gonna pull a ton of money. And even once you fix all that, you gotta tend to whatever's going on up here in the front as well. This driver frame rail, it's bent down pretty severely. It actually looks like the radiator, all that stuff's pushed back as well. Out of these last two, I honestly don't know which one's worse. They're both really bad, but in their own special way. One thing I haven't quite yet got the itch to do is rebuild a motorcycle. But all these salvage auctions, they have plenty of them. Now, to be honest with you guys, I don't really know a ton about them. It's been 10, 15 years since I've even ridden one. But you know, what could it possibly hurt to take a little shortcut through the motorcycle section? You can find essentially any and every type of motorcycle here. I've seen some wild stuff, custom choppers and whatnot at these lots. This is, I believe, an R1, which is the last motorcycle I ever had. Hey, maybe at some point, if I can stop blowing all my money on crash cars, we'll buy and rebuild a wrecked motorcycle. This is one of the things I love about salvage auction. You got commuter, daily driver, commuter type, C7 Z06. Check her out. Blue, oof. Oh, this one got racked. That is a frame rail. That is a frame rail. This is where that frame rail used to be attached. This thing, wow, this is impressive is probably not the word. The hood is, it's just hanging there. So I'm not gonna really mess with that too much. It did have some type of carbon fiber intake on it, which I guess is really small potatoes at this point. This is a beautiful car. The LT4 engine. At this point, this thing's so jacked up that the only thing anybody's buying this for is the engine. I find it highly unlikely that somebody's gonna try to rebuild this one. So once again, we have a parts car. And best I can tell, It does look like most of this damage is limited to the front. You can kind of see the steering rack, or I don't know how well it's showing up on camera, way back there. That doesn't look affected. That sits before the engine, so I tend to believe that the engine survived. The back end, really nice shape. As is the case with most of these vets, they're always wrecked in the front. People tend to run them into things rather than the other way around. This is like very, very wrong type of Christmas present. So it's the automatic, gray interior, blown driver airbag. Now, I believe this is the 3LZ. I am not up to date at all on my C7 trim levels, but it has a stitched dashboard. So I think this is a fairly high trim car. The frame rail over here is broken off even further up. Wow. Fender tub, the fender. The whole front end is just, shoo. Wow. The problem with these is even ones that are hit this bad, they still pull unexplainable amounts of money. At least I can't make sense of it. So even though I would love to buy more of them for parts, I end up having to pass on like 50 for every one I buy. It's that time of year again. Summer's coming to an end and it's back to school. Now, my favorite part of those 3 community college classes I took way back in the day was gearing up for the new semester, you know, to set you up for success and whatnot. Collegiate failures aside, an absolute must-have this fall are Raycon's Everyday Earbuds. Raycon's Everyday Earbuds now feature an active ergonomic design, multi-point connectivity that lets you pair 2 devices at once, and active noise cancellation. But the highlight for me is the sound quality. It's absolutely unreal, and it rivals some of the biggest names in premium audio. Now, I do have other earbuds, but these are my new go-to everyday earbuds, partly because of how suited they are for use in the shop. If you're upside down and under a dashboard, they ain't coming out. Soaked in sweat? No problem. They're weatherproof and sweat resistant. So whether you need a sweet set of earbuds for the new school year, or you need something that's gonna hold up to long, hot days in the shop, Raycon has you covered. To pick up a set of your own, click the link in the description box or go to buyraycon.com/scraplifely to get 20 to 40% off your Raycon purchase. You guys know how there's just some cars you can see from a mile away, wherever you're at. We're way, way back in the corner of this lot. And I know some of the lots, LA, Miami, that we go to have these massive exotic sections, but as for here, that's it. Now, I do know this MC20, it's ran at auction like 10 times. It's in a perpetual state of being sold and the insurance company wanting more money for it. So just in case someone's finally made a deal on it, we're gonna leave this one alone. That way we're not messing with something that somebody else potentially already owns. The Huracan though, check copart.com. This one hasn't ran at auction yet, so we're definitely checking it out. Now, I've seen some truly bad Huracans when I've been at the salvage auction. It does take a lot to total these cars. This one though, at least from what I can see from a quick walk around, it looks like probably the best I've seen. On the driver's side, we have a cracked bumper, and I truly believe that's it. From the fender back, it looks really minty fresh. Yeah, there's some grass in the, oh, BBS wheels. I didn't even notice that at first. Okay, BBS's, so it's slightly modded, even if it's just a set of wheels. The back of the car, that's in great shape. Devil's Triangle. Interesting. We'll be Googling that on the way home. Sticker aside, the entire rear of this car is just in beautiful shape. The color on this is so good. I hope it comes across in camera. This front passenger BBS wheel, that is bent and broken, heavily broken. Oh man. And unfortunately, it pushed the wheelbarrow into the carbon ceramic brake. That is not cheap at all. So that's at least something that aided in totaling this, even though it's not completely mangled. The body damage, this fender bracket, which is all aluminum. I believe they're basically the same thing as an R8. That's broken off. The radiator condenser, the fan assembly, that's all gone. The front bumper, clearly some of that's missing, and I believe actually that I saw it through the window. Yeah, so there's the missing portion of our front bumper. What else do we have here? If you ever wonder what a really destroyed Lamborghini headlight looks like, well, there you go. The interior itself, it looks like the driver airbag blew, but nothing else. It's actually in really nice shape other than that. I suppose what it's all gonna come down to on a car like this is how bad the inner frame structure got damaged. Again, it's all aluminum. It's not super easy to fix, but if it's just the brackets hanging off the side, if it's just a bit of suspension, a wheel, unfortunately a carbon ceramic brake rotor, I'm not gonna say it's gonna be cheap to rebuild, but it won't be hard. On Copart's website, this is listed as not running, even though it has power, so we're not gonna play around with that. The lower driver airbag is blown too. I didn't see that from the other side. We've got 31,000 miles, which I think is pretty high for Lamborghini standards. We're not gonna spend a ton of time on the Lambo because there's another yellow car here that I really wanna see that I can actually afford. But if you, like me, aren't necessarily at a point in your life where you can just go out to the Lambo dealership and buy a Raycon, it's things like this that get you a little excited and give you a little hope that maybe those Lambo dreams aren't necessarily as far away as you thought. C5 Corvettes. I'm gonna be honest, they're pretty plentiful at auction, and I do occasionally at least walk past them, but this one has something that caught my eye right from the jump. It has C6 Z06 brakes on it, so it's at least somewhat modified, and it's not a particularly cheap mod to do either, so somebody's put some kind of money into this. It's got C6 replica wheels on it as well. See the inside. Ooh, MGW shifter, an aftermarket steering wheel, some type of aftermarket seats that look fairly cheap. One thing to note here, even though it has the Z06 side ducts, this is a base C5 Corvette, not a Z06. All the Z06s are coupes, not hatches, meaning it has a true trunk. The glass comes down to about here. Generally, I'm not a fan of the hatches. The Z06s look so tough that it's just hard to step away from that. But this one, I don't know what it is. Maybe it's the lip, the spoiler, the wheels, the whole combo. It just looks pretty tough. As for the damage on it, front bumper is cracked, scuffed. Same deal with the fender. The headlight, that whole assembly is jacked up. Now, if we were to fix this thing, the headlight's probably the most expensive part. These are like 500 bucks for the whole assembly. The front bumpers are actually about the same price. The fenders are cheap. The suspension, that stuff's all really cheap. Let's see the most important part here. Okay, so it's no blower or anything like that. Looks like your standard LS1 Veraram intake. So nothing super crazy under the hood. There's a remote clutch bleeder, meaning it has some type of aftermarket clutch in it. We have aftermarket headers. Yeah, this is essentially your stereotypical C5 Corvette build, at least under the hood. Now, when I was inside, I did hear something beeping at me, meaning it's got some type of power, and it has keys, so, I mean, why not, right? Doesn't sound great cranking. It sounds like something has, I don't know, a miss? All right, we're not gonna force this thing to start. It cranks, the engine's not locked up or anything, but it definitely doesn't sound happy. It's got oil in it. There's no apparent damage to the engine, so I don't quite know what's going on. Either way, if you're looking to fix one of these, by all metrics, this one looks pretty easy. And if you're wanting to get a C5 Corvette and modify it, why not buy one that's already modded? This close. We were this close to finally coming to a salvage auction and not seeing either a TRX, a Trackhawk, or a Durango SRT that ended up there because it's stolen. Then again, we are in the middle of nowhere, Virginia today, so I guess that kind of checks out. There's probably less of them to steal. But hey, this one came in clutch to save our streak. The first thing I noticed on it too, American Force wheels. Now I am fairly new to the whole truck thing, but I do know these are expensive wheels, and all the truck guys I do know speak of them pretty highly, like car guys will speak of Volks or CCWs or any other high-end type wheel. Other than the wheels, it does have stock shocks, but to me this does look a little lifted. It might be slightly, but usually the beds, they don't come up to my shoulders. This has to be at least a couple inches higher. Let's see what's going on the inside. Is it torn up like most of the stolen ones? No, it looks completely untouched. No missing rear view. The dash isn't ripped apart. They didn't even, oh, they did. Oh, I spoke too soon. There is a little bit of stuff hanging down from under the driver kick panel. It has keys, but either the battery's dead or something the thieves did stopped it from starting. It has no power whatsoever. The interior though, it is in beautiful shape, black on red. Most of these TRXs especially that we find at auction are pretty much bone stock. You rarely find these heavily modded. And it looks like that's gonna hold up here. Stock airbox, everything looks to be in order. I don't see a single part missing from this truck underneath. No damage. It's a little dusty, but hey, it's a truck, it's supposed to be. Everything looks really, really good. Now there is one major downside to this truck, and you can essentially apply this to all the stolen Mopars when they get recovered in this kind of shape, meaning it doesn't have any visible damage. It's gonna pull so much money. I'd venture to guess that truck's gonna pull $50, $60, maybe even $70,000 as it sits. It's gonna have a rebuilt title. That's not that far off retail. With that in mind, I always have trouble justifying these types of buys. Usually when I come to salvage auction, I'm hoping to save some money by putting in a little bit of work. And with these, that opportunity just isn't there. Anybody with a Copart account can bid on it, and sometimes when you see these runs, it seems like everybody with a Copart account is actively bidding on it. Of all the newer generation Mustangs they made that isn't a Shelby, let me clarify, I think this one's the coolest. The Mach 1. It has some really cool stuff. Let's see, yes, this one has the Recaro seats as well. I have bought one of these that didn't have Recaros. That was a crying shame. It is 10-speed automatic. Now, normally I'd be kind of excited that the airbags didn't blow in this thing. It'd make it that much easier of a rebuild, of course. But this one, the way it looks at least, I don't know that this is a rebuild car. It was clearly on its roof. The entire driver A-pillar is bashed in. Wow, impressive. That rollover, I am guessing by context clues here, it was somewhere off-road in the dirt. You got mud packed in the wheels, another big dent on the driver rear quarter, mud all in the lower diffuser, and completely packing shut this exhaust. Even for as badly damaged as this is, there's still some highlights. This wheel looks to be intact. I know it sounds ridiculous, but stuff like that does matter when you're buying a car, especially if you're parting it out. There's some Mach 1 specific interior pieces like the dash plaque, the door trim, all those pull a few bucks. Unlike the Camaros, these didn't come with Brembos all the way around. There's the standard floating caliper in the back, but the fronts, we have Brembos. They're still perfectly fine. Now, my big concern with this car is what is leaking out of the bottom of it. It looks like motor oil. The problem is we don't really know if this came from this car or another one that was sitting here previously. The entire lower front of this is bashed in. Wow. That radiator's supposed to sit a lot further forward. My concern when I see one like this is how badly did the engine get hit. And in this case, it does kind of look like the sway bar, the front subframe protected the engine. So at least we have that going for us. It might be a great donor. Don't quote me on this because I am going off the top of my head, but I believe this has the GT350R throttle body and intake, which is why it makes a little more power than the base Mustang GTs. And by the looks of it, especially considering how dirty the outside of this thing is after the ride it went on, the engine's really nice and clean looking. So it looks like it was well maintained, if it even saw enough mileage to need to be maintained. Here's kind of the big question. Is there engine oil in it? So there is still oil in it, and it's pretty much where it should be. Little limp going back in, but we got it. We'll make it work. So I guess, based on the fact that there's still oil in the engine, maybe this is ATF. I'll take a busted transmission line or even a transmission pan or case over any type of damage to one of these Coyote engines. Those 2018 and up Coyote engines, they are a hot ticket. They pull a ton of money, like $10,000 plus. So anytime I can get a good one of those, I'll take it no matter what else is damaged. So hear me out here. I know earlier I said something along the lines of, as far as I'm concerned with M3s, the older they get, the cooler they get. The E92s, even the F80 generations, they didn't really do a whole lot for me, but these, I do have a thing for these. Specifically the X-Drive model, which I don't believe this one is, but it does have the competition package, which is, I guess, half the equation. Let's see, does it have the good seats? It doesn't. So there's an option on these cars. They can come with carbon fiber seats. They're incredibly expensive. They look awesome. Outside of that, though, the interior's in almost perfect shape. There are no blown airbags. It's as nice as you could ever imagine finding at salvage auction. Let's see what we got going on under the hood. Stock air boxes. So this, as best I can tell, not being a huge BMW guy, again, I always feel like I need to say that before I come off saying something just horrendously wrong, but this one looks bone stock. Realistically though, mods aren't what we're looking for on something like this. I'd prefer it to be stock, as weird as that sounds. There's less chance of something being damaged. What I want to see is the engine damaged? And in this case, the answer is clearly no. We only really have to worry about that if something bashes into the front of it or gets right up under it, and that doesn't look like that happened here. There is some front suspension damage here. They presumably just bashed the wheel into something. There's insurance markings over every piece of suspension in the front subframe, but there's nothing on the frame, and that's what really matters here. That stuff really doesn't concern me in the least. The real story on this car is this rear passenger corner. This is where the real damage is. We got the quarter, though, that's really not bad. That's a fix, not a replace. Then down here, that's what's left of that big brake caliper that comes on these cars. Just like the front, pretty much every piece of suspension back here is damaged. And I do see one little insurance mark on the frame. But what I believe they're referring to there, hopefully at least, is that bracket being bent. I think this is going to be a really, really easy rebuild. Of course, so with a car that's damaged on the bottom like this, it's really easy to say that when you don't have it on a lift. But from what we can see at least, which is all we have to go off of here, I do truly think the juice is going to be worth the squeeze on this one. I mean, the beautiful frozen matte blue paint. It's got the carbon fiber roof on it, which is in beautiful shape. All in all, this is one of the nicer BMWs I've seen at the auction. After all the extensive projects I've been through, I truly can't imagine what it would be like to buy one like this, replace a few suspension bits, maybe a subframe, and call it a day. Here we go. This is the car that made me want to come down here in the first place and check this lot out. These are so rare to find at auction these days that every time I do see one, I really feel like a kid on Christmas. A Terminator Cobra. These, for me at least, are the most iconic Mustang, right up there with the Boss 302 that I'm rebuilding currently. I've never owned one, I've always wanted to own one, and now we have a chance. While the days of getting a Terminator Cobra cheap are long, and I mean 10 plus years gone, I do have a few reasons to believe this one's going to be somewhat cheap at least. Number one, though we can't see it because it has no power, it has 190-some thousand miles on it. By Terminator standards, that is high. A lot of people held on to these cars, a lot of people collected them, but for our sake, it's a good thing that somebody drove this one and drove it a lot. Regardless of the mileage, these engines are just so cool to me. This was one of the first cars I can ever remember having that signature blower whine, and to this day, these are the cars that I compare any cool sounding supercharged car to. The reason I'm so hyped up on my truck having that crazy blower whine can probably be traced back to one of these things. Now, I was concerned with as hard as this car got hit that the engine was going to have some damage. Now that we're seeing it in person, you can see that it got hit above the bumper beam, therefore above the frame rails, which is great for the chassis, but not so much for the engine. That means the bumper beam wasn't there to stop it, and next in line is really the engine. Right off the bat, you can see that the blower belt is pushed back almost off the blower pulley. This aftermarket aluminum coolant tank got pushed into that. I don't see any damage on the engine, at least not from this side. It looks like everything stopped before it really got into the accessory drive. Let's see on the passenger side. This side got pushed in a good bit further than the driver's side, though they're both bad. And that, I believe, is the radiator pushed into something on the engine. Now, I really don't know these engines that well, but it does look like whatever this is, it's hanging off the front of the engine. The housing to that is cracked. I don't know how big of a deal that is. We'll certainly do a little research before we place a bid. That aside, it doesn't look like the engine shifted around any, which would be my next biggest concern after something being pushed into the front of it. Aftermarket wise, we got a JLT intake. The filter has seen better days. I think everything else here is pretty good and well stocked. Around the back, I did notice it has some SLP, either mufflers or tips. I can't see all that well underneath of it. What it's gonna come down to is the body damage. From the pictures I saw online, I had no clue if this was gonna be a really bad fix or something a little more easy, like I believe is the case here. The front bumper was mounted up over the bumper beam like that. It was taped to the hood, so I had no idea if we're gonna get down here and find frame rails that were kinked up like 45 degrees. I can say with certainty that's not the case on the passenger side. On the driver's side, this headlight's kind of wedged in there pretty well. Some plastic. I can't say with as much certainty, but it's at least in the right general direction. It looks like almost all the damage is isolated to this upper portion, which is the core support, the fender apron, this upper frame rail, that's all jacked up. But this is a lot easier of a fix than those lower main frame rails, especially for somebody like me who isn't a bodywork professional. But I do think this looks bad enough to at least keep the price somewhat reasonable. It's not like this thing needs a fender and a hood and you're good to go down the road. The hood though, this thing is damaged. The whole bottom, the hood latch section, that's all ripped out of it. So it's not gonna be an easy fix. I haven't priced hoods on these, but I can only imagine getting a factory one is gonna be just uber expensive. And this one, based on that, The date stamping it October 5th, 2002 is OEM. The front bumper, this is all busted up. This, like the hood, may be fixable, but it's not gonna be easy. It is kind of a shame that almost all the Cobra specific stuff on this car is jacked up, because if it was, say, a door, a roof, even a rear quarter panel, all that stuff you can just source off a normal Mustang GT for dirt cheap. There is a bit of a silver lining here. The Cobra specific stuff in the back, the wing, the rear bumper, all that survived, though I do believe the front end stuff's significantly more expensive. So if I could have it the other way around, I would definitely take it. Another thing that makes this one just really not that nice is it's been repainted at some point and not done very well. Almost every edge on this thing is chipping. So if you really wanted to rebuild this and have it be like the perfect Terminator Cobra, you just have to respray the whole thing. The car overall is just pretty ratty, which again, I suppose bodes well for our chances of buying it if, and this is a big if, that comes across to people in the pictures. Also, the door pop open type thing, the springs, they don't work very well. Anyway, on the inside, blown driver bag, blown passenger bag. I don't know how plentiful the Cobra logo airbags are. I can't imagine they're cheap. The Cobra seats, they use this gray suede type material. That's actually held up pretty well. It definitely has a lot of wear, but for almost 200,000 miles, I mean, what do you expect? It's missing the shift knob. I guess whoever wrecked it took a souvenir. Overall, the interior is pretty nice. I actually think the pedals might be bent. It did get hit pretty hard. Somebody might have been stomping on one of them. Overall though, the interior is pretty decent. It has the Cobra replica wheels, the SVEs on it. Who knows what happened to the originals. Back on the passenger side, this fender is pushed into the A-pillar, and you can kind of see the quality of the respray there. The paint's just flaking off. This door, when you try to open it, that's hitting the fender. There's more of that just horrendous tape job. Yeah, so there is a lot going on here, and I know it sounds like I've been saying a lot of bad stuff about this car, but a car like this, a Terminator Cobra, something I've always wanted, I'm not buying it to resell it, I'm buying it to keep forever. I know forever's a strong word, but none of that stuff really matters that much to me. After all, what fun would the project be if the thing was mint and just needed a little bit of work? With this being the way it is, we could get in there and really learn the platform and put our own touches on it. We've seen a lot of different cars today. There's a lot that I want to buy for various reasons. Some for parts, some for rebuild, but I think we can all agree that nothing really compares to finding that one car that you've always had a thing for, sitting at the salvage auction, getting ready to come up for bid, and having the opportunity to buy it. Now comes the hard part though. We gotta wait for this thing to get assigned an auction date. Could be 2 days, could be an excruciating 2 months. Either way, we're gonna keep our fingers crossed, and hopefully, with a little bit of luck, we'll see this thing on the channel in the future.